Welcome to Answers for Thriving. My name is Julia Shalon and founder of Thrivers and your host. Our guest joining us today is Rachelle Saevil, who is founder of creative agency Saevil. Welcome, Rachel, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on here and chatting with you.
So I'm really excited to hear your story, what sounds like a dream adventure of discovering and initiating your business. But first, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, day to day, no 2 days are ever the same. I do run a creative studio. We do branding. We specialize in branding and web design. And today I'm in not the office. So I think we're all kind of in a little bit of a different space right now. So trying to navigate that has been really interesting as well. But what I mentioned is we have clients all around the world. So we do really specialize and focus on building up small businesses in focusing on branding.
Brilliant. Yeah, and as you were talking about with Australia, it looks like I think we feel like we're now coming to this new kind of norm for a while. Can you share with us
Yeah.
how your business is adjusting to this new kind of working?
Well, it's interesting because I've always sort of been doing business online. So in that aspect, it doesn't really change anything. If anything, I've been really adapting to the way that I personally work in terms of how my hours are structured and things like that. So if anything, that's been the biggest change. But then I do see a change on the business side of things in terms of more people pulling back events or postponing launches and things like that. So I do notice a shift there. Definitely.
And what's been your biggest challenge overall to try and navigate through this, would you say?
Honestly, mindset. Mindset has been the biggest challenge to really remind myself that this is going to pass. I'm not sure when. I don't know how it will. And so to try and be living more in the present moment and not thinking too far forward, because then I feel that's when you get caught in the what ifs. What's going to happen? When am I going to get another client? What happens if this happens? How are we going to structure the bills and things like that? So that for me has been the biggest shift that I'm really trying to be mindful of is more navigating the space from that kind of perspective.
Yeah, I love that advice. I keep thinking it comes back to me about how, well, the one thing we can choose is our attitude every day, and that
A
can really
hundred
help pull us.
percent.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to get on to your story. As I mentioned earlier, so what sounds like a dream adventure, you started by purchasing a one-way ticket to Paris, the very glamorous city of Paris. So what made you purchase this ticket, and what were you doing at the time?
So at the time I was living in Toronto. So I'm originally Canadian. I've been living in Sydney now for, oh my gosh, 4, 5 years. Like the time is just escaping me. But I was in a place where I wasn't really fulfilled, and I kind of felt like I wasn't really tapping into my true potential at that period. And I'm not saying that when you have a quarter life crisis, you need to completely uproot your life by any means. But for me, what I really found was I needed to do something bold. I needed to get out of my everyday and that kind of situation. And so, what that looked like for me was leaving my job, my stable job, leaving the relationship that I was in pursuit of something completely unfamiliar and something that would become a challenge essentially. And I spoke French, so that was already a plus for me. And so it wasn't like I was going to another country that I didn't know the language. And some people have. I don't know how they would do that because you kind of have to speak it to live it. And so I was really grateful that my whole life I spoke French. And so it wasn't that big of a difference for me. I felt like I needed a change. Moving to Montreal from Toronto was not a big enough change. And so that's really when I decided that Paris was going to be the new start. I didn't have a plan. I just literally had that one-way ticket. I showed up, I rented an apartment on Airbnb for about 6 weeks. Like I said, I did not have a plan. So I didn't have any friends. I didn't have a job. I had savings. Wasn't like a massive nest egg of savings, but it was something. And that's sort of what got me by. And just kind of like that deep desire to do something completely different and almost rebel against the norm.
Yeah, I love that. So what was it about this trip that helped you find your purpose and understand what you were going to do moving forwards?
It was really all about creating this space to be able to sit in that, to feel what that next step was going to be. As I mentioned, I didn't have a plan, so I had no idea what to expect and what that was going to look like. And so for me, it was really about having that emptiness of, not emptiness like soul emptiness, more like emptiness in the fact that I didn't have physical attachments that were attaching me to any ideas or ways I should be doing things. It was more allowing me the time to have with myself to really figure out what that purpose and passion was going to be. And while I always was in design, it was really stepping into that and kind of making that known that I was going to be creating my own something. I didn't know what this was going to be. I just thought, I'll announce it to people that I'm starting Saevil Row, and it's, a boutique design agency. Like, what it's transformed into being is something so magical. But at the time, I had no idea. So I think, started out by just kind of mentioning to friends and family on Facebook and that kind of thing. And it was one thing after another, word of mouth referrals. That's essentially the foundation in which I built the business.
So did you do any other work in Paris before you decided to do this business?
I did have a job at a cafe, and that was more to kind of meet people and just be social. I didn't do anything else. I didn't have a job. I did apply for a few design jobs in Paris, but I think there was a big barrier there as well. Again, not being, I'm fluent in French, but I was finding it hard to, like, I didn't know any of the design terms in French or how to explain my thought process. I could communicate, basic conversations, but I think navigating this space in a corporate world who's also very rich in their culture of helping the French, and the French are the ones that get the jobs first before anyone else. I found it really hard to actually find a job in my field before I decided to start my own business.
I actually read a book. Have you ever read Almost French?
No,
It's this book.
I
It's
might have
about,
to add that to my list.
yeah, because it's that you'd be able to really relate to her because she's an Australian who moves to Paris. No, she's in another country and meets a French guy, decides to move to Paris, and she can't speak French before she goes there. But she's got her boyfriend, which, it was very early days. I think she met him once before she decided to move there. It was a little bit of a crazy, but why not? And then the whole book is about her trying to embrace the Parisian culture and the challenges that she faced. And, in Australia, we're quite happy going around in our Lululemons. I mean, this was probably about 10 years ago or more, probably 15 or yeah. But she was saying how she had to start dressing up every day. And it was just so many different things, different ways of living that she had to start respecting.
Totally.
Yeah. So how did you?
And they take that very seriously as well. I remember I had a friend in Paris who was living with a French family, and I want to say, I don't know if she was wearing Lululemons or if her hair wasn't, it was something that she was very low key as she usually would. Let's say that it was Lululemons, and she was like, those aren't pants. You cannot go outside wearing those. Whereas I'd be like, throw on the leggings. That's totally fine. But no, they take it so seriously. And even the way that but I really appreciate that. And even the way that they spend just so much time, they mindfully eat, mindfully, and it's slowly, and their meals are long, and they're really enjoying them. And I feel like that's something we could adapt to. And that's something I really admired about their culture. However, I prefer to have cheese before dinner, not after dinner.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I'm actually married to a French guy, and it's really funny, that whole cheese thing. It's like, no, it's dessert.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Not dessert. It's not.
No, it's not.
Unless it's cheesecake.
Yeah, yeah. He's quite happy if we have it at both ends of the meal.
Of course. The more the merrier.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So you started your business when you were in Paris, and then did you move to Sydney, or you're in Sydney? And
yeah, I'm based in Sydney.
Actually, I read that.
Yeah, in Sydney. And so, yeah, I moved the business. So I had the business for about like a year, just over a year and a half when I moved to Sydney. And it's just sort of followed me. So, what we kind of circling back to what we said at the beginning of the conversation is that I've always had this business online. I've serviced clients internationally since day one. And so I've never really had that massive face to face of a business, with the technology of Zoom calls and that kind of thing, instant messaging and email. The majority of the work we already do is online. So yeah, of course we're missing getting to see our clients in person, the ones that we do have in Sydney, but that also doesn't put us in this space where we are constrained by our physical surroundings. And I feel that that is so important, especially right now. This is going to change the way that we do business and the way that we approach business.
I wanted to ask you, so we have, I've been speaking to a few businesses, particularly in the health industry, who have had to pivot online very quickly. And one of the challenges is trying to find clients in this new way. Do you have advice you could give on how to find clients like starting out online? What were the first things you would do and get those clients?
Mm, it is a very interesting space, as I mentioned right now, because everyone is also trying to go on digital. So it's a little bit interesting. I feel like we need to be very mindful in what we're creating at this point because more people are spending time online. Yes, more people are going to be creating businesses online without a doubt. I think it really kind of comes back to the essence of branding and what it is you're trying to achieve to set the foundations for what's going to stand you apart from everyone else. I think that's the biggest thing because you're going to have a different way that you do business and that what you believe in and what your philosophy and vision and values are that are going to be different than your competitors. And I think to really be able to leverage on that is going to be your first stepping point into getting out there online. Now, there's so many different platforms, and I think it's about finding the one for you. So if you're someone who really loves Instagram and who's very active on it, stick on that platform and work from there. I feel that sometimes people try and dabble on every single thing and it doesn't necessarily work out. I think it's better if you put 100% in one platform than 25% in 4 different platforms. And from there, what I would say is the biggest proponent of building a business is going to be word of mouth and the people that already know and trust you. So family members, friends, and friends of friends. So letting them know above all should be your number one resource to getting new business and making it known as well what you offer and being really clear on your offering. That's going to help you stand out, but also make you top of mind when you are trying to get a new business.
Do you have any online tools that you can recommend to help this online situation that could help smaller business in this new area?
Yeah, you know what? The number one online tool that I would recommend is Canva. It is an online graphic design tool, essentially. It's free. You can have a paid subscription where you can upload your own fonts and your logos and all that stuff. You can upload your own logos on the free version, but the paid version like puts them together for you. You just can't upload your own fonts on the free version, but they have so many fonts. But what this allows you to do is if you're going to DIY your own brand, you can put together a type-based logo. You can save that as a file. You can create social media graphics. You can create a little announcements. That would be my first tool that I would recommend because it gets the visual side done and that's easy to then communicate with your audience. The next one would be getting a newsletter subscription service. So MailChimp is one of them. Campaign Monitor is another one. Both have templates that you can just use on their free membership service. Of course, they have the different tiers. But what that's going to do is that is going to get you directly into the inbox of people who would be potentially buying your services or your products. So being able to build a list throughout this time. So again, we go back to the platforms that you're most active on. So let's just say Instagram, for example. You can be doing a free giveaway to get people on your newsletter list. And then from there, they get onto your newsletter list and then you have direct access to be emailing them on a repeat basis. that's something that's really overlooked. And to be honest, I resisted email for a very long time, but the rates in which people are engaging and connecting on email over social media is by far greater than anything else. And you have to remember that while social media is so great to be able to get your message out and to be able to access so many different people, you don't own any of those followers. And so you're kind of doing business on borrowed land. Whereas if you really spend your time to intentionally create an email list, you can drop into their inboxes weekly, bi-weekly, or fortnightly, I guess the Aussies say, and you have more of that direct access. So my two biggest tools to get that going would be Canva, again, for the free graphics and be able to DIY a lot of the stuff. And just to make it sweeter, they have a ton of templates as well. So if you're feeling stuck on your Instagram or, Facebook or anything, you can just use the templates that they have there. So that by far would be my number one tool. And then start getting into the email list and start using that as a direct digital marketing tool.
Yeah, that sounds like some very easy, tangible steps. I think sometimes the hardest thing is just knowing what the first thing to do, especially right now. There's so many things you can start. It's like, where's the
Yeah,
best
you know
place?
what? And I would almost say it's not easy, but it's simple. It's difficult to actually get things going because you're right, you're so overwhelmed, but the process is simple. So it's simple to get started. It is a little bit of a barrier to get yourself there. But I think that's sort of also when a good old to-do list comes in handy. Just jot down almost like order of priority of what needs to get done to really make the most of this, and what logically makes sense to you in terms of that order as well. And then just slowly tick them all off.
Brilliant. So I want to ask you, do you have a podcast that you can recommend? I know you have your own podcast, so I really want to hear more about this.
We launched a podcast. Actually, we have another business called Girl Interrupted. And what we do, and we're in a very interesting time because we were more about the personal and business connections in person. So we had a whole plan for this year of some in-person events and retreats, which obviously we're putting on hold, but we launched a podcast in January, so earlier this year. And what it is, it's really to connect like-minded business women online and offline, but utilizing the podcast platform, essentially as a foundation tool to have inspiring conversations, actionable tips for people to take their bite-sized, either 20 to 40-minute episodes, whether we have guests or it's just my business partner, Gina, and I chatting. So we've been getting so much great feedback, especially because people have so much time right now to listen to podcasts, and it just fuels us to create, more of that content, which is so much fun. We've only done like 14 episodes, but it's still so great for us. But if I could recommend a podcast, it would be my girl Stevie over at Stevie Says Social. She has a ton of digital marketing content. So again, this goes back to what we were just saying about really focusing on that digital marketing strategy in a time of now, because like I said, things are going to change. So Stevie has some great advice. I think she's even launching a podcast course as well for anyone who wants to start their own podcast. So it's a great podcast. So that one I love. I also love Lori Harder. Have you ever heard of her?
No.
She's in America, Lori Harder, and she has a podcast called Earn Your Happy. So she's more like the motivation, inspiration. She does have some really good soul chats and some good people that she interviews, but that's always sort of like a go-to if I'm just looking for a little upbeat podcast to listen to, that I don't have to think too hard. Sometimes you just don't want to learn, you're just like, I just need some inspiration and have someone chat with me. So yeah, that would be one.
Exactly. They all sound awesome. So I'm going to be adding a link to those in this article when it's published, so people can access them super easy. It's brilliant.
That would be great. Yeah.
So now we're all going online. Could you share with us what wellness rituals you're doing, or are you doing anything online classes?
Yeah, so I am doing some online workouts. I feel that working out and just getting some movement into my body is something I need to have in the morning. So we do have a 1-year-old puppy, and so I'm with her usually every morning on a walk, but then I'll need to do something for myself, so I'll do an online workout. I haven't joined this one yet, but I have a few friends who do Melissa Wood Health. Have you heard of her? Again, she's in America, and she does a lot more like Pilates based workouts and kind of like low impact stuff. So I do her, and then also my business partner, Gina, in Girl Interrupted, she has a business called Up to the Beat Fit, and she does dance-based fitness workouts, and they're so much fun, and I'm not coordinated at all. So I can do her basic ones that are fun, but she has some that are a lot more dancey, and I can just kind of go along with it, but it would be embarrassing if anyone ever saw it. But yeah, so Up to the Beat, she has a ton of YouTube video workouts, and they're amazing. So I'm just trying to do little things like that, yeah, to get moving, and then just being really mindful with how much time I'm spending online or watching TV and those kind of things, and just trying to really focus on keeping some sort of sanity to my day, and having lemon water in the morning and still having nourishing meals and being really mindful to not skip meals and that kind of stuff. So just trying to do what I can, I guess.
Yeah, it is really funny way to understand how now to balance our life, because before, I know I use sport to go out, and I'm still going for a walk, but or a run, but that's it. And it's just, I'm doing online classes as well. And then when you work online all day and then you do an online, that's where you do your sport. And then it's like, well, I need to get away, and like meditation, maybe that's it. But even then I'm doing guided meditation. So
Like online at your home. It's like you need to have just different rooms of the house. You're like, okay, well, it's this time. I now need to go into that room because yeah, otherwise it gets stale. And I'm someone who needs to have a different environment all the time. And I'm definitely such a creature of my own environment. So I feel that I'm struggling a little bit being in one space. We did clean out the basement and I put an office in there, but still it's not the same.
Yes, lots of adjustments.
Definitely.
So can you give us some advice? How could you, can you tell us any advice on how we can thrive in times of uncertainty like this?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is really going back to that mindset that I mentioned. I know it's really tough to focus on, what's happening in your own life and trying not to focus so much on the external aspect. But I find the moment that I've felt the most anxiety around everything has been those times where I've thought of too many things too far in the future. So to really thrive, for me, what that means right now is taking advantage of every day and saying to myself, what can I do today and what can I do in this time that I'm going to be really grateful for and come out on the other end even stronger or proud of how I spent this time. And I don't want to look back and say, you were freaking out about this, or you were stressed out about that. And it's only such a short time that we go through any period of uncertainty or trauma or any sort of really deep emotions that are really holding us in this space. And so what I'm really just being mindful of is creating that lightness in my day, but also knowing and reminding myself that we're only living in this for a short term. It's not going to be forever, and that short term might be a few months, yes, but in a few down the very near future, I'm not going to give a time, I don't know what that is, we're going to get out of this, and we're going to, what, I really want to believe that this is happening for the greater good of all of us. And knowing that the Venice canals have been clearer than they ever have been, and Hong Kong has seen blue skies, I'm trying to really be mindful of that for our own environment and for our own humankind, that we're going to come out of this doing business differently, living our lives differently, being more grateful for everything. And so I feel like in order to really thrive right now, it's more about how you choose to live your day to really help how you're going to choose to live your future.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there are so many nice stories on the other side of hearing, the sad stories. But I heard a nice story about, apparently in some cities in India, they're seeing the stars for the first time in 10 years, which was really lovely.
That's amazing. And I don't want to disrespect anyone who would be going through a hard time or who might have family members, that have come down with this, but it's just really about being in your own present and your own reality, and really being mindful of what's happening up here, because you decide what that is, not the news and not anyone else. So I think we all need to be really caring and compassionate in these times.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's all my questions. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much
on
for
Thrive.
having me. Yeah,
it was great to hear your inspiring stories. And I think through all this, it is important to share inspiring stories like this to keep morale up and, keep a lightness. And as you said, we are going to get through this. This is just temporary and still trying to make the most of every day. I think that's really brilliant advice. So yeah, thank you very
definitely.
much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.